So imagine waking up tomorrow, you're pouring your morning coffee, and you suddenly realize that the most critical decisions affecting your daily life are, well, they're no longer in your hands at all.
Right. Completely out of your control.
Exactly. We're talking about like the zoning of your neighborhood, sweeping climate regulations, vaccine mandates, or lockdown rules.
Yeah, the really big stuff.
And now imagine those decisions are being made entirely by data-driven scientific committees, unelected central bankers, and complex algorithms.
People and machines that you never actually voted for.
Right, and crucially, that you cannot vote out of office.
I mean, it sounds like the opening scene of a dystopian sci-fi novel, honestly.
It really does.
But if you look at the literature from contemporary political scientists, it's actually the structural reality of modern governance right now.
So today on the deep dive, we are going to dissect this quiet, subtle, and honestly incredibly pervasive shift happening across the globe.
This transition from democracy to technocracy.
Exactly. We're looking at a really fascinating stack of sources today. We've got historical analyses, modern literature on pandemic governance, and some fresh research into big tech.
And the goal here is to figure out the exact mechanisms of how we got here and what it means for your future.
Right. But to set the stage, let's briefly ground ourselves in what these two systems actually mean.
Good idea. So a good baseline definition of democracy, according to the American Bar Association and political scientists like Smith, is simply rule by the people.
Right, a system that relies entirely on popular consent and public trust.
Yeah, and it's slow, it's endlessly messy, it involves a lot of arguing, but the power ultimately flows upward from the citizen.
And contrasted with that, we have technocracy.
Right. Modern research defines technocracy as any system governed by objective scientific or technical principles. It's where power rests solely with technical experts.
So legitimacy doesn't come from a popular vote or, like, public consent.
Exactly. It comes entirely from technical rationality.
Yeah.
The justification for power is simply, I know how this works better than you do.
Okay, let's unpack this with a visual for you. It's essentially like handing the steering wheel of a bus full of passengers over to a master mechanic.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. The mechanic flawlessly understands how the internal combustion engine works. They know the exact tire pressure required for safety, and they can optimize the fuel efficiency down to the drop.
Which is fantastic.
It is. But do they actually know where the passengers want to go?
That captures the friction perfectly, I think. And to understand how this mechanic ended up with the keys to the bus, we really have to trace the historical roots of expert rule.
Because this idea didn't just materialize overnight, right?
No, not at all. It began as a philosophical reaction to chaos. If you look back at the Enlightenment, there was a 19th century thinker named St. Simon,
Okay.
and he proposed a grand vision of what he called industrial parliaments.
Industrial parliaments.
Yeah. He had watched the bloody chaos of the French Revolution and basically concluded that politicians and ideologues were incredibly dangerous.
So he wanted to replace them.
Exactly. He believed society should be run by scientists and industrialists who would manage the state like a massive, efficient factory.
A parliament of scientists. I mean, I can see how that would sound utopian to a society recovering from revolutionary wars.
Right? It promised stability.
But that's just philosophy. How did it become an actual, political movement?
Well, the catalyst was global crisis. Fast forward to 1919, an engineer named William Smith officially coined the term technocracy.
Okay, 1919.
But the idea really caught fire during the Great Depression in the 1930s. The global economy was in absolute ruin. Millions were unemployed, and traditional politicians seemed utterly powerless to stop the bleeding.
So out of that desperation emerged a movement.
Led to Technocracy Incorporated, led by an engineer named Howard Scott. And they didn't just want to advise the government.
They wanted to take over.
They wanted to abolish it entirely.
Wait, what was their actual blueprint for running the country then, if there's no government?
They proposed replacing the entire price system and eliminating money completely.
Eliminating money.
Yeah. Instead, they wanted to introduce energy certificates. The idea was to measure all economic output and human need in strict scientific terms.
Like using physics.
Literally ergs and joules of energy. They believed that if you just applied strict engineering principles to human behavior, you could eliminate poverty and waste.
That is wild.
They even wore identical gray suits and drove uniform cars to symbolize total unified efficiency.
It's a paradox, right? Because when we look back at the 20th century, we typically define it by the massive expansion of democracy.
Oh, absolutely.
We saw the civil rights movement, the expansion of the franchise, the fall of major dictatorships. Yet simultaneously, the actual machinery of government was being locked away in these untouchable technocratic
That is
systems.
a huge contradiction.
So, how did policymakers justify building a system that actively bypassed the voters they had just empowered?
They justified it through the sheer overwhelming complexity of the post-WWII world. Following the Second World War, governments were tasked with managing things that had never existed before.
Like what?
The atomic energy grid, globalized fiat currency systems, massive new welfare states.
Right.
And the politicians quickly realized that a part-time Congress of elected lawyers and businessmen could not possibly manage the day-to-day operations of a nuclear-armed, industrialized superpower.
So, they created the administrative state.
Exactly.
They basically delegated the power. They effectively said, this is too complicated, let the permanent agencies handle all the details.
Precisely. They passed broad, vague laws
Hmm.
and granted unelected bureaucracies the power to write the actual enforceable rules.
Which normalized the expansion of expert rule.
Yeah, it planted the seeds for the independent agencies and central banks that quietly run much of the modern world today.
So let's talk about where that post-war blueprint lives today, because it governs our daily reality right now. Research from institutions like Chatham House paints a pretty stark picture of how technocratic economic management has effectively depoliticized modern policymaking,
Central banking is the prime example of this. The people setting interest rates.
which dictate the cost of your mortgage, your auto loan, inflation rates, and the health of the entire economy.
Exactly. They are unelected experts, and they are legally insulated from voter backlash.
How so?
They serve long, staggered terms, and they generally cannot be fired by a president or a prime minister simply over a policy disagreement. They control the money supply without ever having to face a ballot box.
And the Chatham House research highlights how this is happening on a massive scale over in the European Union, right? The structural mechanism there is fascinating.
It really is. In the EU, institutions like the European Central Bank and the EU Commission frequently set policy in total isolation from national actors.
So they're insulated from the voters of individual countries?
Right. They are purposefully insulating continent-wide economic decisions from direct voter control. The underlying rationale is that managing a multinational economy is simply too important and too fragile to be left to the emotional whims of populist politics.
Wow.
Yeah, the experts are protected for the voters for the supposed good of the economy.
Okay, but economic policy is one thing, though. People expect finance to be, complicated.
Sure they do.
But where I think the average citizen really felt this shift in their bones was during the COVID-19 pandemic. That is the ultimate modern case study of crisis governance pushing the boundaries of technocracy.
Contemporary analyses really zero in on this. During the pandemic, we saw scientific task forces.
Like SAGE in the UK, the CDC in the US, the World Health Organization.
Yeah, they became absolutely instrumental in dictating policies that impacted the most intimate facets of daily life.
We are talking about whether you could leave your home, keep your business open, or even visit a dying relative in the hospital.
And the mechanism here is what researchers call epistemic authority. The politicians who were actually elected to make those hard societal trade-offs frequently just stepped back.
The transition was incredibly subtle, wasn't it?
Very. The experts went from saying, here is the virology data on transmission rates, to effectively mandating, therefore, you must close your schools.
And leaders justified these extreme unilateral measures by pointing to the panels and demanding the public simply trust the science.
Right. The experts ceased to be mere advisors and functioned as supreme decision makers, largely because any politician or citizen who questioned the broader societal impact was immediately framed as being anti-science or pro-virus.
Think about what this means for the concept of consent for a second. Let's update that earlier analogy. Having a scientific advisory board is like hiring a financial advisor.
Okay, yeah.
You want them to analyze your income, suggest a budget, and tell you where the risks are. But what if your financial advisor was legally empowered to freeze your checking account the moment you tried to buy something they deemed inefficient?
That's a scary thought.
Right. When experts transition from offering data-driven counsel to wielding unilateral, enforceable power during a crisis, the citizen's ability to consent completely evaporates.
That accountability deficit is the core issue, and it gets exponentially more complicated when we look at the cutting edge of this trend.
Because Unelected human experts are only half of the modern story.
Exactly. The dynamic completely changes when the expert we are deferring to isn't even human, or when the power rests with a massive, profit-driven tech corporation operating as a black box.
So we're entering the era of algorithmic governance.
We are. There are profound warnings in the recent literature that digital technologies are transforming us into a technocratic democracy.
A society governed by machines.
Yeah. We see this playing out in municipal governments and the private sector right now. It's predictive policing algorithms that ingest historical crime data to dictate which exact streets police officers will patrol tonight.
Or automated credit scoring algorithms that instantly decide if you qualify for a loan to start a business.
And perhaps most profoundly, it's the proprietary social media algorithms that invisibly curate the exact political information voters use to make decisions in elections.
The underlying code is quietly writing the functional rules of society.
It really is. And behind that code are the major tech conglomerates. Some of the latest research looks at how big tech companies have amassed such tremendous capital and infrastructural dominance that they act as super policy entrepreneurs.
Super policy entrepreneurs, what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, it is a critical mechanism to understand
Mm.
because lawmakers generally do not understand the highly complex math and coding behind artificial intelligence.
They are entirely dependent on the tech companies to explain it to them.
Exactly. The tech lobbyists provide the expertise, which often means they end up literally drafting the regulatory bills that are supposed to govern their own industry.
They are shaping national policy from behind the scenes.
Yes, they are.
Think about the accountability gap here. Imagine standing before a judge who sentences you to 10 years in prison. But when you ask what law you broke, the judge says they are legally forbidden from telling you because the legal code is a corporation's proprietary software.
Wow, yeah.
If an algorithm systematically denies mortgages to a specific zip code, or if a tech giant subtly tweaks your newsfeed to sway a national election, who exactly do you vote out of office to fix it? How do you hold thousands of lines of hidden code accountable?
You can't, not through traditional democratic means. And that brings us to the ultimate friction point of this entire phenomenon.
Which is?
Well, we can clearly observe that machines and experts are taking the reins. The deeper question is why society is so willing to let them, and what exactly we are sacrificing by making that trade.
The literature gives us a very stark look at this trade-off. On one side, the benefits of technocracy are undeniably alluring. It offers tremendous speed.
Right, by completely bypassing the slow, gridlocked, and often toxic political cycles. An expert committee can execute complex, long-term planning with incredible efficiency.
But the cost of that speed is steep.
Very. Democracy is built on transparency, popular legitimacy, and direct accountability. Several recent analyses argue that pure technocracy is fundamentally incompatible with democracy.
Because experts are trained to hyper-focus on a very narrow definition of efficiency.
Yes, like maximizing economic output or minimizing viral spread. And because of that, they almost always ignore the broader, unquantifiable social values.
There is a brilliant critique leaning on the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Engels that captures this perfectly.
Oh, the one about administering things.
Yeah. The warning is that by constantly deferring to the cool calculation of experts and data, a government may successfully learn how to administer things, but it does so at the absolute cost of ruling over human agency.
Citizens cease to be participants in a shared society and simply become data points to be managed.
And over time, both sides of the political aisle have started to take this technocratic efficiency for granted, which actively marginalizes the messy values that democracy was built to protect. Things like fairness, justice, and liberty.
It replaces a moral argument with a mathematical equation.
Let me push back on this, though, because I think a lot of people listening might feel conflicted.
Okay, let's hear it.
When we are facing something as urgent and globally catastrophic as climate change, or a novel, highly contagious virus, don't we inherently need the raw speed of a technocrat? If you're on a ship sailing directly into a Category 5 hurricane, you don't call a town hall meeting among the passengers to vote on how to trim the sails.
No.
You let the captain take the wheel and dictate orders, because relying on slow, uninformed democratic debate in a crisis will get everyone drowned.
That is the most potent argument in favor of expert rule, and it's highly rational in the short term.
Yeah.
But political scientists studying democratic justice point out a critical flaw in that analogy.
What's the flaw?
Yes, you need the captain to steer the ship through the storm. But the captain's advanced knowledge of meteorology and navigation does not grant them the inherent moral or legal right to unilaterally sell the ship once the storm passes.
Oh, that's a great point. Or to permanently lock the passengers below deck.
Exactly. They possess expertise, but not sovereignty.
So they should advise, but not rule.
Right. The framework of democratic justice dictates that experts have immense irreplaceable value, but they must serve as counsel, not absolute rulers.
Having a PhD in virology or climate science does not give a person the right to unilaterally circumvent democratic procedures and rewrite the social contract.
The expert should explain the parameters of the crisis, but the citizenry must decide what sacrifices they are willing to make to survive it.
Which brings us to the concept of course correction. If technocracy is incredibly fast but lacks a human soul, and democracy is fair but dangerously slow to respond to modern crises, how do we prevent expert rule from completely swallowing the citizen's voice?
Well, the research outlines several concrete policy mechanisms for harmonizing the two systems.
Okay, like what?
First is forcing transparency onto these closed-door expert bodies. Whether it's a central bank or a public health task force, the data and the internal debates leading to their mandates must be subject to open public scrutiny.
And what about the algorithms?
Second, we have to establish aggressive independent auditing of algorithmic systems, specifically targeting hidden biases in predictive policing and financial software.
But how do the citizens themselves actually get a seat at the table? Transparency is great, but it still leaves the public as mere observers.
This is where the concept of deliberative democracy comes in.
Deliberative democracy.
Yeah. The literature heavily advocates for the widespread use of citizen assemblies. Imagine taking a randomly selected representative cross-section of the public.
You say like 100 everyday citizens.
Right, you compensate them for their time, you bring them together, and you give them direct access to competing scientific and technical experts.
So they actually get to hear all sides of the data.
Exactly. The experts present the data, but the citizen assembly deliberates and drafts the actual policy recommendations. It is a structural bridge between everyday human values and highly specialized technical reality.
The non-negotiable goal being that technocrats always answer directly to bodies that are tethered to the voter.
Yes, that's the key.
I hear that, but let's be realistic about human bandwidth for a second. Is it practical to ask a busy parent who is working 50 hours a week and just trying to keep their head above water to sit on an assembly and audit a highly complex AI algorithm?
Or dissect a 400-page epidemiological report.
Exactly. Are we expecting the average voter to suddenly become a polymath?
No, and that's a crucial distinction. The goal of deliberative democracy isn't to make everyone a scientist. That's impossible.
Okay.
The goal is to mandate that scientists and engineers optimize their systems for human values rather than just raw numerical efficiency.
So a layperson does not need to know how to code a neural network to understand that a credit algorithm shouldn't discriminate based on a zip code.
Exactly. And the public doesn't need to understand the molecular structure of a virus to weigh in on the psychological toll of prolonged school closures.
Democracy and expertise have to function as partners.
The expert is solely responsible for providing the how, but the public must always retain the power to define the why.
We have journeyed all the way from the Enlightenment era dreams of industrial parliaments, through the economic collapse of the Great Depression, right into the modern reality of pandemic task forces and invisible algorithmic governance.
It's been a long road.
And the central takeaway from all of this research is clear. The sleek efficiency of technocracy is deeply alluring, especially when the world feels chaotic and terrifying.
But deferring to the math comes with a severe, potentially irreversible accountability deficit.
We are witnessing a fundamental transfer of power.
We really are. We are slowly moving from a society based on the consent of the governed to a society based on the calculations of the managers.
So, here's a practical takeaway for you, listening right now. The next time you read a headline about a sweeping new mandate coming down from an independent agency,
Or the next time you experience a frustrating, unexplainable automated decision from your bank or a social media platform,
take a moment to pause. Ask yourself, who actually made this decision? What specific data did they use to make it? And most importantly, by what mechanism can the public push back and hold them accountable?
maintaining an awareness of that dynamic is the absolute first step in preserving human agency.
There is a quote from Plato found in the historical research that really anchors this entire deep dive. He warned, thousands of years ago, that democracy dies by abusing itself.
It's a chilling thought for the modern era.
It really is. If we willingly hand over our civic duties just because the data is too hard to read or because the global crises feel too overwhelming to manage, are we the ones abusing our own democracy by simply abandoning it?
Something to really think about.
I want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to mull over. Imagine a future, maybe not that far off, where a super intelligent AI becomes the ultimate flawless technocrat.
The perfect manager.
Exactly. It is perfectly capable of managing the global economy, halting climate change, and curing all disease. But in exchange for that utopia, it requires total obedience and the permanent end of democratic elections.
Yeah.
Would you cast the final vote to put it in charge?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the code.